How's it going, everybody? Back at it again here at the DNA Golf and Life Podcast. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for liking. Thank you for following. And thanks for being here. A lot going on this past weekend. We'll get into the NCAA basketball and the PGA Tour and everything else in between. And as always, remember, if you're interested in golf instruction here locally in West Michigan, please go to my website, dnagolfinstruction.com. There I have an appointment book. You can see all the rates, our mission statement, and exactly who we are and our philosophy and everything else there that's pertinent to golf instruction. I'm trying to do more group and corporate golf instruction as a way of team building and then sharing in more of a presentation fashion. Makes it more fun for everyone, a little more affordable, and a great way for your company, business, family, group of friends to learn in a fun way. So trying to help you find your DNA, and go to that website, dnagolfinstruction.com, for any questions that you might have. But we're going to start this week off with a sad, somber feeling and note after hearing the news of Tiger Woods rolling his car on March 26th. Story is that he rolled his car in Jupiter, Florida, a residential neighborhood, and is being charged and arrested for DUI, suspicion of intoxication, not with alcohol, but with some other substance, property damage as well, and refusal to take a urine test upon arriving at the jail there. Passed the breathalyzer, but wouldn't take the urine test. So we've seen this with Tiger. It's sad. He's one of my heroes, and I've seen him do great things on the golf course. But I've seen him do some stupid things off of it, especially in the last 15 years, and it's really sad. Even with my kids, to tell stories about how great this guy was, and to see sort of this tail end of his career as he's 50 years old and what's going on right now, it's sort of sad. But it doesn't diminish what he accomplished. It doesn't diminish how good he was or how good he is skill-wise with the game of golf. His achievements are still outstanding. But we're just praying that he can get some help and figure this out, as a father, as a person that we all care about. We're just hoping we don't see another one of these rollovers. The last one, at the Genesis, that was scary stuff there. Obviously the injury of tearing the Achilles and all the things that we're seeing him deal with that's keeping him away from playing golf competitively. That was bad enough. And, to see it again, it makes it that much worse. My personal feeling is he needs to go away, man. He needs to disappear for a while, get himself together. I watch the TGL League, and every time I see him, like, his eyes look so beady. He just doesn't look right. Something looks off. And, we know how many surgeries this guy's had. We hear the stories of these athletes from basketball and football, hockey, right? They get addicted to these painkillers and their method of relief. And, that can't last forever, especially if it involves, things that are unhealthy and drugs that are going to harm you. I just don't understand why he's behind a wheel. It makes no sense to me. As much money as this guy has, like, he's got a team for everything else that he does. Why isn't there someone to chauffeur him around, especially knowing the pain, knowing the past? It reminds me when Charles Barkley sort of got in trouble with Michael Jordan and talking about how, Michael Jordan had so many yes men around him and that these people wouldn't tell him anything other than what he wanted to hear. And, that's not being a good friend. That's not being a good, staffer in that instance, if you are close to him. So I a lot of confusion as to why this happened. But understanding addiction, understanding, what people can go through, even understanding that he's lost both of his parents. I mean, I told you, man, people get weird when you don't have mom and dad to tell you about yourself. People get strange. But I think in his case, it's just, wash, rinse, repeat. And for him, it's trying to get healthy enough to play and doing the things to his body that he has to get healthy enough to play. And then, running into hiccups and things that detour him from that. I thought it was cool that Anthony Kim made a statement recently just saying he didn't know what Tiger was dealing with. I should probably find that. He didn't know what he was dealing with, but, obviously he was in his thoughts, and, he understood what addiction could do to people and how harmful it could be. And, but I like how he worded it. Like, I am not in his business. I don't know what he's got going on. But just like the rest of us, there's a lot of love and concern for what we keep seeing from him. And, I almost had the little crying Jordan in the back of my head thinking about this mugshot and how it's going to be on the next T-shirt that we see like the last one was, right? And it's just as bad. And, to see someone so great painted a light like that, it's just horrible. But we do see it. We see it a lot. And, as a God-fearing person, sometimes I just wonder if that's God's way of reminding us that everyone here is human. And even though we see them do miraculous things that, sometimes, even the individual, they need a reminder that they're human. So I just wish him all the best. I patent so many things in relation to my golf game, pre-shot routine, love for the game, after watching him for so many years. So there's always this hope that I'd get a chance to see him play again like we did in 2019. But I think that's out the window. And now I'm more worried about his health and him being a good father and someone that maybe, I run into as a PGA professional later down the line. I'm weird about wanting to meet my heroes. In my mind, they have no reason to want to meet me. So I couldn't be the person. It's hard for me, and I've met him a couple of times, asked for autographs and things like that, but it's hard for me to want to go up to somebody that, I don't mean anything to, and he's probably there for a, publicity reason, or she or whoever. And I've always felt weird about wanting to approach people and meet them in that particular instance. The way that I looked at it is you've already helped me by showing me whatever it is that I was trying to learn. For the Tiger example, watching him win the Masters and watching him win a U.S. Open with a injury in his knee, right? Those are amazing things that taught me about perseverance, what it looked like to win, what it looked like to overcome. Michael Jordan hitting the game-winning shot against Utah with the flu, losing against the Pistons year in and year out, and then finally figuring out a way to beat them after gaining muscle and getting stronger. Scottie Pippen the same way. So all of these athletes and people that I look up to, Jalen Rose is one of the bigger ones, right? Show me kind of how to be brash but yet professional and still succeed, all in the same kind of mold. So I don't get me wrong, I'd like to meet these people, but in the same respect, like I don't want to be in their face. I'm very appreciative of what they meant to me, and they were a tool for me to learn things, and that's all I need them for. But sometimes you can meet them, later in life, and when the buzz has died, and even when things drastically don't happen to careers, sometimes people just fade and their popularity changes, and then they become a little more accessible. And in those instances, I'd love to talk to somebody and maybe express to them, what they meant to me in a time. Sort of had that a few years ago at a PGA annual meeting. Jack Nicklaus was there, and I was there for a PGA lead, set of classes and learning sessions, and the opportunity to network with PGA leadership. And lo and behold, Jack Nicklaus was there. Right. And, oh, wow, Jack Nicklaus. And, people were nice and going up to him and asking him for pictures. And of course, I wanted to get a picture. with all the other PGA leads, and I wanted to say something. It's in my nature. I don't know. It's a little bit of my mom in me. But knowing that he's a Ohio State person and grad and all these things, and knowing how much I love my Michigan Wolverines, and probably should have went there. If I could have played golf there, I probably would have. So I decided to say, hey, Mr. Nicholas, I have 2 words for you. Go blue. And it couldn't have been any better. Best 2 words I could have said, because he looked me in the eye, and then he grabbed me by my coat, and he gave me one of these, and then he started laughing. And we had a more candid conversation, right? The rivalry, brought a real personality out in him, which allowed me to just be myself. So for a while, we talked about, the rivalry in Big Ten schools, and he talked about how much he respected Michigan and all the Big Ten schools, and I kind of agreed with that. And I asked him if he knew Kevin Hall, because Kevin Hall was one of my buddies from the Cincinnati area. My whole family's from Cincinnati, so I've known Kevin Hall, which a lot of you guys know, ever since I was a little junior golfer running around. So we've known each other for years. And of course he said, yes, I know Kevin Hall, because Kevin Hall won the Big Ten tournament when he was playing at Ohio State. So it was just cool to connect some personal dots, and I did get a photo. I think I got 4 or 5 other photos of us just talking to each other. And those are the ones I cherish, right? The ones where I had a real conversation. So, maybe I'll get that with some of my heroes and people I looked up to. But the most important thing is like I said, I gained so much by whatever they provided, whatever their skill was, whatever their greatness was. Just by being great, I was able to learn. And that's an old W.E.B. Du Bois quote from years ago, where he talks about, we're doing ourselves and others a disservice if we're not trying our best to be great. If we're not putting our best foot forward and, showing what we can be at our best, well, now we're not giving that best image for other people to emulate. And I see that in basketball for me, Dr. J, to Michael Jordan, to Kobe Bryant, to what we see now, to golf with Tiger and the fitness side of it, the drives, 330 carry, and whatever these guys are doing. He was the bridge for that, right? And of course, equipment and some of that stuff that we'll talk about in the Golf Tech Corner. But heroes aren't heroes forever. But what they did, it withstands the test of time. And Tiger's record, the things that he's achieved in golf, those won't go away. And I wish him all the best and hope that he can get it figured out. And on that note, I don't know what he's going to do about TGL. I would step away if I was him for a while. And then the branding. I mean, we're even at the club right now, we're so excited about Sunday Red because, people are able to get accounts now, kind of. And, we're so excited to have that feature. And now we're kind of sad. We don't even know if we should put it out, right? So we just hope it all works out. The Sunday Red stuff does look good to me, and I like how he was bringing back some of his classic shirts that he wore as a junior golfer, and even his logo and some of those things look pretty cool too. So wish him all the best, and hopefully he gets through this sad time. It was also tough for me this weekend too, because another one of my heroes bit the dust. This one just in the sport. I watch a lot of MMA and UFC, and Israel Adesanya lost in the second round to a 15th ranked fighter, Joe Pyfer. And he didn't look bad, but he didn't look good either. And I think he needs to go ahead and retire. I think his time in the sun is also up. And that's a sport that evolves, pretty quickly. I don't know if there's any fans out there, but those strikers, those guys that like to stand up and strike from long distances, they're clever, they're hard to figure out, but once the world sort of figures out what you're doing, you kind of evolved past your style, and I think that's where he is. I think we saw it with Anderson Silva, although it was more age with him. We see it in boxing too. Big boxing fan. shout out to all my brothers, my three big brothers, Monty, Scott, and Jay were big into boxing, and I remember sneaking up late at night to watch some of the fights that Mom would let them get. So I've always loved boxing. I'm talking, Hagler, Hearns, Sugar Ray, Duran, and just love it as a sport. But I remember when Roy Jones, dominated the world, and kind of was getting a little older, and timing was getting a little off. But at some point, someone solved that puzzle and got him up out of there. So to all those that are athletes that had a time to shine, congratulations, because a lot of us don't even get to where you got. And for those that are even at the highest, upper echelon, like you know what you've done and who you are and how elite you are. So Izzy Adesanya, shouts out to you. One of my favorite people to watch in the last 6, 7, 8 years. And like I said, it's just sad to see someone that I looked up to start to lose. So I had to hang my head a little bit after he lost that fight, but he sounded right. He said the right things afterwards, and who knows? Maybe he'll still continue to fight. It's just with those MMA guys, like I said, I think that the evolution's faster. Bruce Lee would have loved it. That's what he talked about, and kind of why, like, he would get in trouble for mixing, art forms, taking the best of what worked and then blending it together. And that's what we're seeing there. Even in golf, we see a lot of that. The things that work, we're seeing more of. The things that don't, we see less of. But who's been watching basketball? I have. And man, my Wolverines are looking mighty good. Oh, man. Yeah, we're looking mighty good. That M right there is looking mighty good in the Final Four. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy getting there. But the Final Four is set. Arizona versus Michigan. The other side, we got UConn versus Illinois. And, I'd call these all blue blood programs that have a tradition of being good at basketball. But only 2 1 seeds this year. Not all 1 seeds. So a little parity. Maybe we're getting some parity coming back. And with these kids shuffling around as much as they do, like any team can catch lightning in a bottle. But it's been fun to watch. And my Wolverines look great. A lot of weapons. I was concerned about our guard play without our backup Kaysen, but man, Cadeau has really stepped it up. The freshman McKenna's really stepped it up too. So we're looking solid, man. And now the toughest test of them all, Arizona. Man, they're dangerous. And that Pete kid, watching their Elite Eight game, that little jumper he was hitting, he was impressed. I'm impressed with what I'm seeing there. But I like my chances, and I like what I'm seeing out of my guys. And I like how no one's really played well. Our big men, Johnson, Mara, no one's really done extremely well below. Ball movement's been good, but even Alabama, that first half of the Alabama-Michigan game, the Sweet 16 game was ridiculous. They weren't missing. I was sweating in the corner like, man, this is crazy. But eventually it calmed down in the second half, and we started to do what we needed to do. And then, the Tennessee game, I felt confident. I know how Barnes coaches, like watching them play Michigan State and Michigan so many, so many times in the last few years, even when he was at Texas. I know how he coaches. I know he likes to kind of keep the pace slow and very traditional with how he does things. But I've never seen Izzo struggle with him. Any of the Michigan coaches, none of them have ever really struggled with his style. And I think those boys are getting frustrated out there too with us. So I like how we look. Said Arizona's tough. I'm not going to say the winner of that game wins it all, because if it's that good of a game, then that team has to get mentally reestablished before they go into that finals game. If they don't stand a chance. But how about that Duke-UConn game? Wow. Man, oh man. I was glued. Watching Duke sort of take control at the end of the first half, beginning of the second half, and then it was theirs to lose. But that darn Dan Hurley, man, I'm not the biggest fan of Dan Hurley. We'll get to that in a second. I don't hate the guy, but it's just something about him, man. He's just like, there's a quirky arrogance that, I don't know. It bugs me a little bit, but it works, and his kids love him, and that's as a coach really what I care about. Do your kids love you? Well, then forget what everyone else has to say, and you can kind of see that from his players now and the people that have played for him in the past. But they were plugging, man. They were plugging away. That last 10 minutes, that lead just kept shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And, shout out to the Boozer brothers, though. They are outstanding, very smart basketball players, played well. Sounds like Cam's the favorite to win the Naismith this year. Although we got someone on our team, Lundenborg, that should at least get some honorable mention for that. Especially how he's the glue to our team, not necessarily in points all the time, but he just covers every base. And like I said, we love him, but I'll give the edge to the Duke guy, and that's hard for a Michigan guy to say, especially one that grew up watching the Fab Five. But I have a certain respect for their coach, their system, their program. Coach K, like what can you say bad about Coach K? And I think that Coach Shire is going to be a great coach, and he'll get his chance. He'll get there, and he'll get a win. But it's UConn's time. For some reason, I thought Mullins was Chris Mullins' son, but I don't think they're related. But I thought that, but my research says they're not related, and the boy's from Indiana somewhere, not New Jersey. So. But what a play. I mean, even that last play. I mean, Duke passed it incorrectly, got it to the middle of the floor correctly, got it to the smaller Bruiser brother correctly. Maybe he pivots with the ball instead of kind of turning and lobbing it up. I mean, he could have held it. If he would have just held on to the ball, that's the game. But I don't think you can blame him or – I'm not going to look too deep into that, except the fact that he's a freshman. There you go. A little bit of that. Then now I'm wondering, too, will they both come back? Like, I think that Cam might be ready to go. But does he come back? Duke's got to be like home. Your dad played here. Got to be living it up on that campus. Got to be some fun times for those young men on that Duke campus. So I might want to stick around for another year. I wouldn't mind, I remember Carmelo saying that. Carmelo Anthony was thinking about trying to stick around Syracuse for another year because he liked the college life so much. But Coach Boeheim was like, no, you need to go. Probably get himself in some trouble if he stuck around. So get your little butt out of here and go to the NBA. But there's nothing wrong with staying now that you're getting NIL money and your dad was already an NBA player. So there's no rush. But we'll see how that plays out. But fun to watch. Great Final Four. Shout out to Illinois, too. I mean, I didn't expect them to be in a Final Four this year, but their coach is tough. And, even my Wolverines have had our struggles against Illinois. And historically speaking, they've always had a good team. And with Chicago in your backyard, there's certain hubs that we can talk about, for basketball players. And, almost catching a cramp here. Did leg day today. But you have, New York. New York's the hub for me. I'll throw Indiana as a hub. Chicago's a hub. Detroit's a hub. Kind of Midwest and the East Coast. Those are the places. I know LA, y'all got your little hubs and places out there too, and there's basketball players everywhere. But traditionally speaking, there's a lot of people to recruit that can go to Illinois, right? And they've just been struggling to kind of capture what they need to capture. So Northwestern's in that backyard Big Ten school, but obviously you have to be Ivy League intelligence, and you have to be able to pass that SAT, ACT to get into that one. But said you got to be able to read and be able to kick some butt when you go to those types of schools. Even in today's day and era. And I'm sorry for the noise. Like I told you guys before, we're in my studio, and if someone's cutting the grass outside, you might hear it. If someone's got a blower, you might hear it, because this is the main level of my floor. So I do apologize for the noise, but hopefully it's not too bad. But the men's side's been fun to watch, and I'm going to predict that my Wolverines go all the way, and we're going to stick with that until we hear from someone else that doesn't believe it. But I really think that we have a good chance to win. Really enjoy our coach. We think we have the guy of the future, and kind of like I got a best friend that's a diehard Michigan fan and actually did graduate from the university. And we would always have debates about coaches for football and basketball and who we liked and who we didn't like, and we've always complained and fought about it. But we talk about Dusty, and Dusty we trust. So we're good with Dusty, and I think everybody else. As far as Michigan Nation, we really like what we're seeing, especially so early on. This is his second Final Four now, after the first one at FAA, and now he got one here. And I like how the kids play. John Beilein was one of my favorite Michigan coaches of all time. Steve Fisher's another one that I think is underrated. But Beilein, the ball moved. The way that the play would develop was so consistent and smooth. And I see a lot of that from Dusty. And then a lot more freedom for the kids to just be who they are and let their talent shine. So I'm enjoying it, and we'll see what happens. I did chime into the women's side a little bit better this past week, and I still think it's UConn's to lose. I watched their Elite Eight game against Notre Dame, who also has one of my favorites on their team. But it's theirs to lose. I mean, Gino, this is like 100th Final Four? How many Final Fours has this guy been to? I think it's like 36, 37 for real. Might even be 38. But it's ridiculous to think about how many times this guy has gone here. And when you look at UConn on the men's side as well, and talented programs. All you do at UConn is win in basketball. If you're a woman or a man, doesn't matter. You're winning. And watching, players develop and watching them go from freshmen to seniors, it's been miraculous or amazing to watch. And I was looking at the minutes, of the two veterans, AZ Fudd and Sarah Strong. And Fudd had 37 minutes. I think she only scored 13 points. And then Strong played 39 minutes of the game, right? And Notre Dame, they had control of the game, but they didn't go away. And UConn was struggling to make baskets, especially three-pointers. But fun to watch. And part of me was cheering for Notre Dame. I really like Hannah Hidalgo. She's a gritty little player, and those little glasses are just the cutest little things. But she's scrappy, man, and she gets down there. She's one of those people that I wish was taller. If she was a little bigger, God forbid she had a little more size, she'd probably be that much more dangerous. But it's fun to watch the women's side and some of the characters that I've been following for a few years. And I thought it was sort of sad to see her playing partner, Olivia Miles, transfer to TCU. But Olivia mentions that she's got her joy back. And, TCU tonight, it's Monday. They have their chance to play against South Carolina. And we'll see what happens. And you know how South Carolina is. They're always tough. Don Staley coach team. They're going to play defense. They're going to get up and down on the court. And I'm really looking forward to see what happens tonight. And then we will have our Final Four set for the men and the women. And any predictions, let me know. Any fans of any of these teams, let me know. But my Wolverines are ready. We're ready to go. And I'm hoping we catch Arizona slipping. So, go blue. But also this past week, Gary Woodland wins the Houston Open. And what a great story, to have, tumors and cancer and to be dealing with so much, less than 2 years ago, and to climb the ladder and win on the PGA Tour again. I think it's something amazing. I'm glad he shared his story with us, what's happened with him, what's happened. He's been very candid, even emotional in interviews about, life in general, how much his wife meant to him, how much life means to him and the people in his circle. And kind of like we were talking about last week for lessons learned, like that is important. And it's not until tragedy hits that we realize how many people we have around us that care and that we care about, and how precious life is. So it was great to see him win. He dominated, man. Like, see if I can pull up his scores here. Yeah, every time I looked at the leaderboard, he was just ahead of everybody. 64, 63, 65, 67. Wins by 5 strokes over Nikolai Højgaard, who also played well. Sleeper for the Masters, And then Minwoo Lee, tied for third. And Minwoo, I thought he class act. Last hole, heading up. He kind of lets Gary go ahead, and we see this a lot in golf. This is the camaraderie side that we do like. But he understood the moment and let Gary walk up to the green and start going like this to tell the crowd to get loud. Now the crowd's paying attention and realizing the moment, and it was a pretty big standing ovation coming up to that 18th green. And another cramp, and pretty cool to see. That's why I got my water today, man. Last time I was in here and I didn't have my water. And my mouth got super dry. But we're learning on the fly here, guys. And I got to take my creatine. I haven't taken my creatine today. This getting old stuff, man. Taking your vitamins, drinking your water, getting sleep. These things become more and more important the older I get. It's very, very weird stuff. But I'm trying to live a healthy life and hit the golf ball farther, so I'm doing what I can in these times. One thing I didn't know that Gary Woodland worked with Randy Smith. Randy Smith has become famous for his work with Scottie Scheffler. And I like hearing that, and I like seeing the differences between a Gary Woodland swing and his pattern and a Scottie Scheffler, right? And as an instructor, I want to have that versatility. I don't want to see robots. I don't want everyone to look the same because we're not all built the same. We don't all think the same athletically. We all have different ailments, right? We all have different things that help us generate power. So although there's similarities in what my expectations are and what I'm trying to get the player to understand, I don't want people to feel like they have to be cookie cutter or fit in a box. And I like seeing the different patterns and knowing that Randy has kind of worked with both of them. Watching Gary a little closer this week, I didn't realize that his follow through, it has a lot of the Schauffele kind of look to it, hands high, sort of wrapping around the neck a little bit closer to the body rather than, further away. But a very, very good move. And once again, guys, for all of you that try to tell me that you have to swing so aggressively and fast, well, Gary is a guy that pounds it, but he's under control, and it doesn't look like he's out of control, kind of like a Jake Knapp. Even a Xander Schauffele is another good example of that, okay? And for me, an athletic standpoint, I believe that most athletes are slowing themselves down, and they're slower in their mind than what they look to the rest of us. So key in on the other side of that spectrum, not just the aggressive side, and pay attention to that when you see short game shots or some of these smoother swings like a Jake Knapp or a Gary Woodland. Just ask yourself, they don't look like they're moving that aggressively, right? And kind of use that as a starting point. Moving less makes it easier for ball contact to happen. Long chip. I hope you guys are noticing some of these outfits too. Tony Finau, a little crazy with the button up, but they're getting baggier. It's more of a zoot suit, classy kind of a look. I don't know what's going on here. It's not like the 90s baggy stuff. But it's unique, and I'm starting to like it. You know, you see Jason Day with his Melbourne stuff. You see even Nikolai Højgaard had a baggier Adidas pant on, where these guys are looking a little wider. So very, very interesting to see the fashion changes. And, you know, here in the boring Midwest, we're always the last to implement some of this stuff. East Coast trends, West Coast trends, and then they sort of converge on the Midwest, you know, as far as the country clubs in the area and what our member bases want around here. So really, really excited. Masters is coming up. We got one more week of regular play on the PGA Tour, Valero, Texas Open, and then it will be Masters week. And, you know, that gets me excited here in Michigan because we know it's time. It's time for courses to open for good for the year. Weather's improving. We're seeing more green grass, and that's sort of why you're hearing that buzz in the background. Someone around me's cutting their grass or getting some yard work done, I bet. But with that being said, I know, you know, the economy's crazy right now. Gas prices are ridiculous. Can't imagine what it's like in the West Coast or some of these bigger cities. But golf's getting expensive too. And I'm curious to know what things are you guys doing to kind of combat the cost of golf. You know, I have some ideas. You know, obviously being a PGA pro, I just try to utilize my facilities I can for me and my family, for opportunities to play and whatnot. But even there, you know, my time equity is cut pretty short in the spring and summer because I'm working so hard, and it's always a challenge to get my kids out. And I think I've averaged maybe 6 rounds of golf. I think last year I might have got 8 or 9 in, but I don't get a chance to play often, and I'm ready to change that trend. It's time to play more. Too many reasons to play. I got to get my kids out. I got to get some of my junior clients and adult clients out, and I actually like golf. So you think I would play more, but I only have 4 months to teach as much as I can and do as many clinics as I can, so I tend to go that route. That is the loudest noise, and I do apologize. But we got to stick with it and deal with it. But some ways that I see people kind of control the cost of their golf, you're seeing memberships, obviously, private clubs, and then making sure you get your rounds up. Semi-private clubs, I think that's one of the best ways to do it. A course that, you know, might be, you know, higher public, you know, higher end public, but offers some type of play membership, probably has some leagues and some outing activity that you have to fight. But a lot of times they have reasonable, you know, rates and something that if you play consistently, you can get your costs down to dollars, right? Less than $10 a round. And I've seen that happen at several facilities that I've worked at in the past. And even some city courses, right, where you can buy, you know, range membership and course membership, sometimes just buy the range membership, so at least you can practice consistently. And then if you are playing less, at least your game doesn't really show it. But I know it's tough, especially if you have a family, especially if you have kids that want to play, you know, a spouse. I know some people that really depend on that range membership, you know, spending, you know, a couple $100, whatever it is, to get access to a range and getting your buckets every day. See a lot of those at the city course here that I work at on occasion. But I get it. Golf is expensive. It always has been. Equipment is expensive. That might be another recommendation. Like, how often are you purchasing new clubs? And maybe we need to delay the time between purchasing the new driver, the new putter. I'm in the middle there, right? I'm on the side of teaching the skill of golf. I'm teaching you how to play a sport and develop a skill. So I'm always going to say, hey, man, you don't need to get the equipment to get better. Now, on the other side of that coin, I would say if you're going to buy the new equipment and it's going to encourage more play and more practice, I'd love for you to get the equipment. And that's sort of the debate that I have with a lot of my, when I worked in sales and even now, kid wants his dad to buy him a new driver. I'm like, you can't hit the fairway with this one, all right? Let's hit the fairway with this one, and then we, let's put our ducks in a row the correct way. So I don't know, man. I know junior rates, twilights, off days, some of that stuff is going away. You're not really able to take advantage. And I know that's what my father used to do. He took advantage of every junior rate. I feel like we even had a few coupon books, the coupon books that go around and, have punches in them that you buy for $40 or $50. I feel like my father got away from those at some point because he was tired of, the limitations of when you could play, when you could use, and but it was a way. It was a way to get us out there, and using several of these different things might, combined together might be the way to go for the next few years. But I understand, things are expensive. These courses are, since COVID hit, we're actually busy, and courses are packed to a T. And hopefully facilities, you feel welcome, and we're doing our jobs as professionals and golf course staff to make sure that you're enjoying your experience, even though it is costing a little bit more. Okay? So with that being said, we're going to drop into our lessons learned segment. So I'm going to go over to a more comfortable seat for a few minutes. We'll just chat about a few things here. All right, so for today's lesson learned, I remember one of the times I had to deal with anger, and I see this a lot from my younger golfers. So we're going to talk about anger for a little bit. As a junior golfer, I was at a tournament in Toledo. It was a national tournament, invite only. And after the first day, I was in the tournament. I think I was in third or fourth place and playing fine. But as a young golfer, I always had this thing about perfection. Like, if I hit one shot that felt a little funny, it was like, what was that? And now I'm in my head about trying to play perfect golf. And whenever I would get in those modes, I would always play the worst. Why? Because I'm thinking the most. I'm thinking too much about every little thing. I'm not letting it go. When you hear athletes in their best moments, when they're playing their best, they're not thinking, they're letting instinct take over, and all the practice and preparation, it does its part, right? So when you start overthinking, bad things happen. So I started overthinking a little bit the next day of that second round. And I believe I shot maybe a 40 on the front nine. Not out of the tournament completely. And, still feeling like I'm playing halfway decent. Hole number 10 made a par. Hole number 11 was a par 3. Couldn't have been longer than 128, 129. And I remember stepping up to the tee. I hit a wedge right over the pin. I'm staring it down, like Tiger. I'm holding it, and I just know this thing is going to be perfect. But it flew the green, probably landed about 15 feet past the pin, kicked, and ended up on the back fringe. Not a horrible place to be, but I was so upset that I flew the green. So upset. So while the other two playing partners are coming up and hitting their shots into the green, I'm in the back of the green reading my putt with my putter in my hand. I'm on the fringe, but I'm going to putt it. And there's not a lot to the putt. I don't know why I remember that, but there wasn't a lot to the putt. Maybe a little break off to the right, pretty level, but in the midst of that shot reading, looking at these guys coming up to the green, I'm getting angry about my front nine. So what do? I'm hunched over, reading my putt. I start jamming my putter in the ground. And on the third, it snapped and it broke. Now remember, I was angry. As soon as that putter head broke, I wasn't angry anymore because I thought my dad was going to kill me. So I looked at him, he looked at me, I looked at him, and he said words to me that he wasn't saying with his lips, but with his eyes and his demeanor. And I was thankful I had another 7 holes to play before this man could kill me. But like I said, anger went out the window. Now it's, what am I going to do? It's panic mode now. I'm not angry anymore. It's panic mode. I still have this hole to finish in another 7 holes. What do I do now? Right? So straighten myself up. First thing I did was grab my sand wedge and, practice tool. I had an instructor that always made me putt with my sand wedge to get the true roll. And I started with that. First one I hit from the fringe, it sort of bounced a little bit and I didn't like it. I think I ended up three chipping it, 3 putting it, right? Hitting a bladed wedge 3 times and I got into the hole. So the next hole, I went to my 3-iron and I tried it with my 3-iron. I 2-putted, but something about it I didn't like. I think I had a closest birdie putt, but couldn't make it. The next hole, I was on the fringe, chipped it close, tried it with my putter, with my driver. Missed the putt, made bogey, right? The next hole after that is when I decided to stick with that sand wedge. But in all the explanation of what I did, the way that I moved, I really maintained my score. It didn't get any worse. And the anger that was obsessing my mind was now gone, and that energy was now on focus. So, long story short, I ended up finishing that round. I think I shot 77 or 78. Did not compete for the overall competition, but did win, I think, 2nd place for my age division. This was a national minority tournament in Toledo, and some of you might remember this. Adele Fleury was one of my buddies that was there. David Davis is a name that some of you might remember. That was the first tournament that Kevin Hall beat me. I'll never forget that because he was probably 12 or 13 and I was probably 15, 16. And he wrote in his little text message, "I beat you." And I said, "Oh, man." And of course I was frustrated. But I remember later on, talking to him and giving him, a handshake and telling him how good of a job he did. He was so excited. And I think he was one of those kids that placed in the overall. And just really, really, really proud of him. I think I said Milton Coswell was another name that was there. But some of you might have been there. Jamila, coach, Maryland Eastern Shore's old coach from a few years ago. I believe she was there. So some of these names, you junior golfers from the 90s might remember some of these names, or that Toledo tournament, at the park, Toledo Park golf course there. But I remember, getting off the golf course, and of course I was still sad. And my father and I had a great conversation that, I started with tears and anger, like, "You don't know what it's like. I'm trying to play good," and blah 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 blah. And he started crying and reminded me that every shot that I take, he's with me. And he paid for it. And I wouldn't be here without him, right? And he wasn't saying it he was saying it in a way that he understood and he cared just as much as I did. So it was a great experience, great conversation with my dad after. Like I said, I'm glad I had 7 more holes, because he might have choked me with the rest of the golf clubs. But, out of bad situations come great things. And from that tough situation, I realized how much my father loved me, how much he cared for me. and how ignorant I was, right? Like, you young people out there's certain times in your life when you think you know something, and you got several reminders if you pay attention that you don't know anything yet. And that was one for me. And I never broke another club ever, for the rest of my junior career, even into college, to this day. And I realized not to take things so seriously. It's okay to focus. It's okay to want it. But it's not okay to get angry, because anger always leads to poor decision and poor focus. It does not lead to me getting what I want and achieving the goals that I want to achieve. So just like the NCAA tournament, just like golfers on the PGA Tour, LPGA Tour, when we're out there playing our round, the person that keeps it together the most and holds it together is the person that probably is going to succeed the most. Okay? So control your anger. Okay, one more note, too, about those national minority tournaments. A name came to mind, and a lot of you golfers around my age, let's see, I'm in my mid-40s, but if you played in any minority events, maybe got access to an AJGA event or two, or a state or local event, there was a gentleman by the name of Bill Dickey that helped us all out. And I'm hoping that this doesn't sound crazy to people. Everyone should know his name in golf, especially from an African-American standpoint. He was my dad's fraternity brother. And I remember the first time I met him was in Sacramento at a national minority event. And I was on the driving range, and he came over and introduced himself and told me how good my swing was, and built a relationship with him like a lot of other people my age had the opportunity to do as junior golfers. So I was just thinking about that. And as we think about those that have helped, it's important for me to mention those people. And my next thing is who's going to replace him? Who's the next Bill Dickey, right? And maybe it's me, maybe it's you, but he did so much for so many people that I feel a responsibility to do whatever I can for the people in my environment, the people that I come across. I can't do much, but I've been able to pay for some, Michigan kids to play in tournaments in Florida. Paying some entry fees and helping out when I can, helping get equipment when I can, helping get access to certain things whenever I can. So I think that it takes a village, it takes a team. And Bill Dickey, we very thankful for everything that you did, and you taught a lot of positive lessons to a lot of young people. So thank you. All right, now let's jump into the Golf Tech Corner. Today in the Golf Tech Corner, we are going to talk briefly about the force plate technology that's out there now. We're getting a lot of technology in golf, and I'm going to try to talk about some of it. Last week we talked a little bit about golf sims and the pricing and the accuracy, and this week I just wanted to talk about the force plate technology and sort of what it's used for, and my thoughts around it. At the PGA Merchandise Show, there were several companies that were utilizing this force plate technology. For those that don't understand, imagine having two scales or two measuring plates underneath your feet as you swing. And as you take the club back and through, it's measuring everything from the weight distribution to your center of gravity, and combine that with some of the TPI features or other 3D imaging things, we can tell a lot about your athleticism and how much of it you're using or how much you're leaving sort of on the table. Okay. Now, I will start off by saying, working with force plates and working with momentum, power, center of gravity, all these things are fine and dandy, but they do not hit the golf ball. So please remember that. I feel like there's a misconception that, like, TPI, if I go do 1,000 exercises, I'm going to play better golf. Or if I have these force plates and start reading them and changing the data, I'm going to play better golf. I am not to that point yet. And I don't think that there's any technology that can help you understand how to make ball contact, consistently, and that's what golf is, okay? Now, is it a tool? Yes, I think it's a great tool. It's an outstanding tool. Imagine the golf swing. As you take it back, the force plates tend to read heavy on that back foot. As we get up to the top, the better players in the world will show transition at the top of their swing to that other side, the other force plate, okay? And then there's a certain sequence of what stops first. The weight shift, the rotation, the club head. And it stops in that sequence. Weight shift, rotation, club head is that last thing that stops, helps us to use the ground force, and it's sort of how we create speed, okay? Now, at the PJ Merchandise Show recently, I was able to sit and listen to some really important and famous and well-known coaches and instructors, and also sit and learn a little bit about some of these technologies, and even I think SportsBox AI was there. But Mike Bender was there, top 50 teacher, and he's got a few ties here in Michigan. Some of the instructors have great relationships with him. But he mentioned a test that he did, and I'm in his line, like his school, like in relation to what golf is. It's a lever system sport, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But he took a swing in a swivel chair, the one that it's kind of off the ground a little bit and it moves. And he got a certain club head speed. I think it was low 50s, 50 mile an hour, we'll call it, 52. I think that's what I wrote down here. Then he was in another chair that didn't swivel, and his feet were still off the ground, a little faster, up to 53. Then he took a swing on his knees, a little faster, 57. Then he took a swing standing, but didn't really engage his body, just thinking of his arms back, arms through. Shot up from 57 on his knees to like 88, 89 miles per hour, standing, but not using, follow through weight shift, just kind of standing tall and swinging the arms. Then he took a regular swing and it sped up to 92, 3 or 4 degrees faster. Okay. Now, what is that evidence of? Why did I mention it? What happened as he went from swivel chair to non-swivel chair to knees to standing to regular golf swing? He was able to use the ground forces a little bit easier, especially when standing or taking the regular swing. He was taller, able to use the ground forces more, cemented in the ground a little bit more, right? Not necessarily twisting and doing a lot, right? So I use that logic to say what I've already heard from a lot of these instructors. Force plates are awesome. They help an instructor determine your center of gravity and how your weight shift is. But the other side of that, it doesn't help you hit the golf ball. Remember that. And more importantly, most of these top instructors, especially the ones I look up to, they're only using these tools for verification of what they already knew. That's what they're using them for. They're not looking at them and seeing anything with that data that is strange to what they've already picked up on. Now, I do believe in the use of this 3D imaging, and 2D images do lie to us. It doesn't tell us what the person is feeling. And I think that force plates are a great tool. But I think that the amateur, me as an instructor, I'm going to start figuring out ways using regular scales to kind of teach you the same things. Maybe we'll do some videos where we use some regular body scales and we understand weight shift and understand sort of, what we're doing. That helps the player to understand what they're doing. But for me as an instructor, I still would rather you focus on the lever system, how that's performing, rather than being concerned about weight shift. But if you have a great lever system, you know how to make solid ball contact, this is where the force plates come in for me. The Smart to Move company, the Catalyst company. I think I got Vald down here as well as another force plate company. I think that that's where you can start investigating ways to get faster and ways to add that extra element to your golf game. But got to figure out how to make ball contact first. That is the first step. So for this Golf Tech Corner, I like the force plates, but just like a lot of the other technologies, I think it's more about data and kind of confirming what I'm already seeing rather than having you worked to get these plates to move or read in extreme ways. It's sort of a problem I have with TrackMan too, right? These younger kids will figure out ways to manipulate the number on TrackMan, which sometimes doesn't translate out to the golf course. Yeah, if I need a tank angle, like whatever, I can definitely manipulate and make it happen. But can I get the result that I need on call when I actually need it? And there's some discussion about that from a TrackMan perspective as well. Okay, so I like identifying all the parts of the golf swing, but just like rotation, swinging hard, ball contact loses out. And I want ball contact to be the premium and the most important thing that we focus on. And one last note with force plates, and I run into the same thing, guys. That's why I'm talking to you this way. Someone comes out with a new technology, I start playing with it and thinking about something and go down a rabbit hole. I did it with the force plates. Then I realized, well, I'm already kind of addressing force plates, balance, and lower body stability in how I teach with the zombie drill and right leg forward drills and left leg forward drills, ways to get your lever system to be the biggest thing that's moving and in control so our athletic intelligence can attach to it. So I really think that, there's a lot of good tools out there, but please remember that they're all one-dimensional. They all, I'll leave it at that. They're all one-dimensional. They all help you with one aspect of something, and they're helping you feel, understand, realize something. You still have to apply that to making solid ball contact, and then we're on to the next thing, okay? So with that being said, for this last little segment here, and I once again, guys, I apologize for this noise. I had a feeling this was going to happen. I saw these trucks outside this morning. It's probably more distracting to me than anything else. But we're building a new space down in the basement, and we'll soundproof it, and everything will be lovely down there. It'll be beautiful. But I couldn't wait. I wanted to learn, wanted to start talking to you guys, and starting to get you guys into doing this every week and making it better and better. So as we get into the quick tip of the week, and in referencing my thoughts about a lot of things, force plates and everything else, I thought we'd just dive into a little bit of my golf philosophy. And, DNA golf stands for Discover Natural Ability. And I grew up playing a lot of sports. And to me, golf, being exposed at 6 years old, it's just another sport. So that's my starting point with golf. Most people have a starting point where golf is that foreign thing that's different than a lot of the sports you played. And because it's foreign, you don't feel athletic doing it. You can't understand how to put your athleticism into a golf swing. And that's my first step. I want you to be an athlete in golf like you are in every other sport. So just like the basketball player who follows through, the thrower follows through, the tennis player follows through, the bowler, the ball tosser, the dart thrower. I reference the golf swing in a very simple form for most of my early students and remind them of the importance of follow through, okay? Even before that, if I asked you what a golf swing was, how would you define it? I would define it, and my followers and you people that get lessons from me, you understand this already. Golf is a lever system activity where we are swinging a golf head and a golf club in a circular motion and trying to be as accurate as we can, and in some instances as fast as we can, but accurate as we can. And once again, that's like every other ball sport I've ever played. If I think about what a throw is, it's a lever system action where the kinetic chain is involved, weight shifts, some hip rotation and arm is moving, but the lever is the most active part. And just like a quarterback who gets hit and can't move all of this, he can still throw the ball with the lever. So that lever system has to be active. It's impossible to hit a golf ball without your lever. It is possible to play golf without the ability to use your body and only your lever. Hence the gentlemen that use wheelchairs, verticats, adaptive chairs, wheelchairs, right? If you have a lever, you can play. The other thing that has a lever is the mechanical arm that tests all the golf equipment that we have, right? If you've ever seen that, it's a base that has an arm that comes out and moves the club in a circular motion for accuracy. It's most accurate because it doesn't have a body to ruin that accuracy. And then they can test it based on that, the speed of that club, okay? Basketball, lever system. Kicker, lever system, okay? So golf is a lever system sport. That is a very, very important thing to define it as, and it would simplify for you all a lot of what you need to control, okay? It's not that other body parts don't move. It's just if I'm focusing on those things moving, I am not focusing on the club head returning to the ball for good contact, okay? That's what we learn from short game shots. We start to develop that. And the higher that intelligence is, the better you can make ball contact, the more aggressive you can get with your golf swing, the more room to play and, kind of experiment with length and more power. That becomes a pertinent argument. But if you can't make solid ball contact, I do not want to see you swinging hard. And side note to that, for all of you that played other sports or witnessed other sports, there's not too many sports where all-out aggression is good. Football, yeah, but I've never seen a jump shooter in basketball look rushed. That's good. A quarterback never looked rushed or panicked or out of control with straight power. A boxer, that would be a drunken bar fighter, not a boxer. A boxer's always under control. So thinking about control from a lever system perspective, and for me, lever system is arms, shoulders, chest, lats, upper back, upper torso, right? Everything that sort of sits above that pelvic girdle there. That's kind of the things that are involved in the lever system to me. And you'll hear me explain the golf swing sort of as a building, a windmill, where the base of that building should feel fairly quiet. The roof, the head, stays pretty still. The windmill blades, the lever system, is what we're really using to hit the golf ball, and everything else is secondary to that motion. Okay, so that's sort of a thought on what DNA golf philosophy is, and how I will always explain the golf swing. I think we run into another issue with golf with a lot of the other ball sports. We're facing our target. Golf is a two-target sport. Sometimes in a lesson I'll ask you, what are you aiming at? What's our target in golf? And you'll say, it's out there somewhere. And they'll say, no, it's the golf ball right in front of us, right? That's our target. And with that being the case, ball is our immediate target, flag, fairway, whatever as our secondary target. A lot of you that want to twist and move affect that lever system's ability to be straight because of all that additional movement, okay, from a sideways perspective. I look at the field goal kicker as probably the most similar to a golf swing in the sense that they put the ball down, they look at their spot. Then they look at the goalposts and where those are, then they take their steps. And once they take their steps, they look at the goalpost again, and then boom, they're looking at their spot. Then they say hike. Once they hike, their eyes are on that spot until it's gone. Then their head and body come up, okay? So the sequence of that is very similar to the sequence of the golf swing. The lever system is moving the most. the kick, the leg, the lever leg, right? The body is intact in relation to that target or behind it until it's gone, right? And then there's a good follow through after the contact, okay? So as we get into the season, and I'm going to start doing a lot of videos here, we're going to break this down. My first step for someone who's never played golf, you're probably going to get a towel from me with a knot on the end. And I'm going to make you swing it like a golf club very lightly to develop a swing with some element of pattern and follow through. And then we're going to try to duplicate that with the golf club. Once I got the lever active, then we're off to a better start and we can do some things, okay? So just remember that, the DNA golf philosophy, discover natural ability. We want to remind you that golf is a lever system sport. And we're going to dive more into that later. I think I'm running a little longer today, but I do appreciate you guys joining me again. And once again, we're going to meet every week, at least for 45 minutes to an hour, just talking about golf, life, business, what's going on in the environments around us, and everything else in between. And I'm really excited to keep doing this. So, got my eyes on the NCAA tournament over this next week. And we'll be talking about the Masters coming up. And hopefully you guys are just like us in Michigan and you're starting to get out there and play a little golf. So have a great day and find your DNA.